Nintendo is suing the Palworld creator Pocket Pair for infringement and damages.
Nothing about what Palworld does seems like it should work.
PyroLive, a game developed and released by the defendant, infringes multiple patent rights.
If Nintendo and the Pokemon Company win this lawsuit, it could have a far-reaching impact on the games industry as a whole.
But why now? Why September? 9 months later, damn near, that they finally start pushing this legally.
I didn't think that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company would be petty enough to go after Pocket Pair on patent infringement.
Yeah, I've actually heard good things about this.
The time has finally come. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company have finally filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Palworld. Does that game sound familiar? Well, that's because it was basically one of the biggest games in the world for about a week. And then everyone kind of realized that Palworld was this amazing Pokemon-esque game, but it didn't really have that much complexity, that much depth. And also that was all the way back in mid-January. Yes, it has been that long since Palworld came out. You are so old. Now, before I get into this, to regular viewers, I need to address the elephant in the room. You're probably thinking, where's Darkwood? You said it'd be out on Friday. There's no video. At the minute, while recording this video, Darkwood right now is being rendered. And then on top of that as well, it has to be uploaded. This in of itself is going to take like a whole entire day. This isn't a thing where I'm trying to move the date so it gets more views or anything. Like the video literally cannot go out because right now it is being rendered and we have to take into account the possibility of, you know, rendering errors. Problems with the upload as well. I mean, a good example is the song that we paid and got the rights to use. Their offices to whitelist the video are going to be shut on the weekend. So when we put the Darkwood video out tomorrow, it's going to get copyright claimed. Something we've spent the best part of a year working on is going to get copyright claimed and we're going to get no money. Obviously, what we're going to do after that is file a counterclaim, get all the money back. So, you know, it's not a total waste of time. And also, I do want to say we are selling the merch. That'll be available when the video drops tomorrow, parasitical.store. Now, I know that there are some of you that haven't watched the channel and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Did you forget to take your meds? But this is a video I've been hyping up for quite a while. I'm really, really excited for it. Like, genuinely, when I upload slop and stuff like this, I don't care. Who does daily slop and they're actually proud of it? It's garbage. This video, I'm really looking forward to it. I genuinely think it could be the best, most in-depth, like, review analysis thing I've done for any given video game. So yeah, it will be out tomorrow on Saturday. I really wanted it out today. I'm incredibly sorry, but it's really the best I can do because we physically cannot put it out right now. Anyway, back to Palworld. If you do remember it, it was basically advertised as Pokemon with guns, which is this weird tagline that so many game companies try to use to advertise something. I remember when Far Cry 3 came out, which of course needs no introduction. I did a main channel video on it that was mostly just a plot retelling.
And like every boomer in a UK club, you down hallucinogenic potions, not knowing what they'll do to you, only to please her.
Give me it, it's mine!
But I remember, I think it was IGN, and they basically advertised the game saying it was like Skyrim with guns, which is a statement that makes absolutely no sense.
Are you serious?
Now, Palworld was basically like any kind of open survival game, except there were Pokemon, but they weren't called Pokemon, they were called pals. And each pal had different abilities. Some of them could help you fight other pals to catch them. Some of them could help you fight bosses. Some of them specialized in material gathering. Like, I remember when I was playing the game, there was this one kind of pal you can get, and he was basically just like addicted to coffee to the point that he was basically nocturnal. So he worked better during the night and would sleep during the day. And then, of course, they went to the next step where you and your pals could use guns. Not like Nerf guns or laser beams. I'm talking like real, actual guns.
That's just an actual stolen model of an AK as well. Okay, that was kind of funny.
And this is something that Pokemon never experimented with or tried with, because if you think about it, if you think about Pokemon, you think it's a happy, family-friendly game. They don't want to ruin that image. But then in Palworld, meanwhile, you can just get like a minigun or a shotgun. Now, some of the designs of some of the pals in Palworld, you know, they were definitely a little bit suggestive. I think, for example, Lavender, which is one of the pals you can get, basically created the next generation of Goonas. Now, Palworld sold incredibly well, over 15 million copies, like a month after its release. And then on top of that as well, another 10 million players on Xbox, so over 25 million players total. These numbers were insane. Were they leeching off the success of Pokemon, and especially because Pokemon is only available on Nintendo platforms like the Switch? Yeah, Yeah, it was, because everyone that played it basically played it because it was Pokemon, but they didn't have to play it on the Switch. I mean, another good example that I can think of, and this is a real old head reference, Minecraft. Minecraft, before it came out on the Xbox, it wasn't a thing. It was only on PC. So console developers tried to jump in on that, and then they basically made Fortress Craft, which was, it was okay. It was basically just Minecraft, but it looked a little bit more realistic, and there was no survival mode. It was simply just creative mode. It was okay. I mean, it wasn't anything amazing. Now, from day one, Power World was in a lot of controversy because, again, there are a lot of similarities to Pokemon. Again, Pokemon is called Pokemon. Power World is called Power World. Both of them involve like catching and collecting creatures and having them fight for you. There's a lot of similarities. Now, despite that, the game was a huge success because, again, you're able to play Pokemon and not have to buy a Nintendo Switch, a console that's great to travel with, but every game runs at around 10 frames a second. But some other controversies that Power World's developers were involved in is the possible use of AI as well, which wouldn't really be very surprising, you know, using AI art, considering one of their previous games, the entire game was basically an AI image generator. Now, again, every game is inspired by something else, right? Like, for example, Kojima games, Metal Gear Solid, it's basically just based off what film he saw that week. Everyone is inspired by everyone, and that's totally okay. But the similarities between Pokemon and Power World were kind of getting too big to ignore. And one thing people were very quick to point out is how some models looked incredibly similar to pre-existing Pokemon. Now, I'm going to show a bunch of examples on screen, just let it kind of run as B-roll. But if there's, you know, one or two examples, it's not really game-breaking, but there's loads and loads of examples, and it does slowly add up. This can be stuff like, for example, models clipping into each other because they're just, you know, similar shaped. And then there are other weird claims as well, like, for example, certain parts of pre-existing Pokemon were used to make Pal World pals, almost as if, like, you know, if they took certain aspects and didn't rip off the entire Pokemon, that would be okay. And obviously, it's not the best combination when you have a game that is very similar to a huge pre-existing franchise, and then the CEO of your company is constantly bragging about how great AI is. Literally bragging on Twitter that they used AI to bypass copyright. Apparently as well, they even said in one blog post that most of the character concepts for Power World were actually created by one graduate student. However, the CEO of the company, Mizobe, actually went to Twitter to address, you know, getting harassment, death threats. This was mostly directed at the art team, as a lot of people believed that, you know, these were basically just rip-offs of Pokemon. And then Mizobe, the CEO of Power World's company, basically said that these are opinions. It's not genuine criticism. Now, that being said, and obviously, you know, sending death threats and stuff is just cringe behavior, but it is really important to know, if you read the statement, he doesn't actually flat out deny anything here. He just basically only asks people to stop harassing the artists. So, to no one's surprise, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company were slowly picking up on these connections between their IP and then Power World. Now, Dan McGowan, who is a former legal chief for the Pokemon Company, said himself that Power World looks the usual rip-off nonsense I would see 1,000 times a year. Big Chungus! And was surprised that no one stopped the game from releasing. And obviously, not too long after the game Power World actually came out, the Pokemon Company put out an official statement saying that they will be investigating these claims that may infringe on their intellectual property. Now, the game's lead creator, Takuro Mizobe, went on to state that the game has cleared legal reviews, but again, seeming how he was basically bragging at using AI to bypass copyright, I'm not sure how ethically true that statement is. However, for clarity's sake, I do have to say that all of this controversy, all of this drama, this goes as far back as January. Now, let's fast forward to several months later, and what's happened to Power World? Oh, look at the player count. It's not doing very good. No, it's not doing very good at all. I mean, to be fair, like, even looking on Steam charts, the game is still getting, you know, just shy of 30,000 players every single day. That's obviously less than 1% of the 2 million peak it had, but still, it's pretty much the same thing that happens with all games. Even if they're being constantly updated, the player base does tend to drop over time. It is pretty normal. But again, several months later, it seems that Pokemon and Nintendo actually put a lawsuit out against Pocket Pair, the developers of Power World. Now, looking at the public reaction, there's definitely some, you know, mixed reception about the lawsuit. You know, some hardcore Pokemon shills are celebrating the downfall of Power World and how this, like, copycat game is finally getting some justice, and then other people are saying that Nintendo are basically trying to sue a game instead of making a good one themselves. So a day later, Pocket Pair responded, basically not acknowledging the lawsuit at all, saying that they're not even aware of which rights and patents they're infringing upon, and they're awaiting further details. Again, I feel like this is a blind leading the blind. The Palworld developers are just going to play stupid, basically acting like this is a random lawsuit that like isn't warranted at all, despite the game basically just riding off the coattails of Pokemon. But also, that being said, I know Nintendo are like one of the most out of touch companies in the world. I still don't understand how they can treat their fans like absolute dog water, and they still have so many glazers year after year. Like genuinely, some Nintendo fanboys, if they got spat in the face by a Nintendo developer, they'd probably praise it as the second coming of Christ. Please keep spitting in my face, please. I'm gonna put it in a jar. I'm gonna put it in a jar for you, Nintendo. Oh my god. Now, despite them being frustrated, Pocket Pair are keen to fight this lawsuit. They probably don't have anywhere near the money Nintendo do, but they might even be willing to make some kind of compromise. And if anything, this could actually be a landmark case, because if you think about it, if Palworld would win against Pokemon, then to be fair, I imagine there'd be so many more clones that had come out, like Pokemon clones. I also definitely don't think it helps that Palworld has mods that add Pokemon characters. Like, you can replace the main character with like Ash Ketchum. You can add other, you know, playable Pokemon and stuff into the game as well. That's probably going to be something that Nintendo are going to cling to and basically prove that it's, you know, stolen from them. Now, getting into nerd specifics, it is really important to note that what Nintendo are actually doing here, they're filing a patent infringement lawsuit, not a copyright infringement lawsuit. And that's very clever on their part, because if they filed for copyright, they might fall into the problem of, you know, fair use, which is that kind of gray area. Is this something transformative? Is it building on the original work? You know, it's like people on YouTube that make like film reviews and stuff. They might mention or have like a disclaimer saying that it's not meant to compete with the original work. It's transformative in nature, all that kind of like legal blah 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 or boring jargon. But a patent is different. If you infringe on a patent, that's something that someone owns. That could be an invention or a process, and that patent is invented to stop other parties from copying said, you know, invention or process without, of course, the inventor's consent. So it's much more easier to defend a patent than it is copyright infringement. Now, a lot of people are confused about the patent, because even though it is easier to defend in Nintendo's court, the gameplay is not similar between Palworld and Pokemon. I mean, they're both around catching these weird little creatures and then using them to fight, but then Palworld expands on that because you can use them to like mine resources. You can give them guns. And also, Palworld is more of like a kind of open world survival game. You've got to keep your Pokemons fed. You got to make sure that they're rested. You need to take care of your own stats as well. You can upgrade your own character with armors. Like, is the base foundation basically Pokemon? Yes, but I think that they've added so much content, you couldn't really call it a Pokemon game anymore. So a lot of people started to dig around and look at why Nintendo was actually filing a patent lawsuit. And it was actually discovered back in 2021, Nintendo actually filed a similar patent for the concept of a character capturing a monster with an item in the field in Japan. So that is like the most broad general description. They basically tried to get a trademark for being in a field catching monsters, specifically with an item, which is very sneaky. That's not even like a Pokeball or something. That's just an item. That could be like a chest or something, right? Whoa, watch out, From Software. When that mimic chest killed that guy, he technically caught him. That's the same as Pokemon. And also, it's very important to note that Nintendo filed that patent back in June 2021. That is the same year that Palworld was announced. So they knew about it, but they also knew that it was coming out in 2024. And then, which seems to be what's happened, when Nintendo found out that Palworld was going to be successful, they didn't like that. So they filed even more patents to come back and harm them with. Again, it really just shows like Nintendo are a scary company. I've talked about many examples how they're out of touch. I'm sure you guys might remember me and loads of other YouTubers crying about, for example, you know, playing Nintendo video games. You know, that's giving them free promotion. Nintendo didn't like that. If you covered anything Nintendo related, they would basically claim your video unless you had a partnership with them where they take part of your money to promote their games. So I'm paying Nintendo to promote their games. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, a good example is Video Game Donkey. He's like one of the biggest Nintendo glazers known to man.
Mario is the king of video games. We all know this. Time and time and time again, Mario has just completely fucking annihilated every other game on the market. And for the past 7 years, I think Nintendo...
He would do videos like, for example, Super Mario Odyssey, saying how amazing the game was, and then Nintendo rewarded him by claiming his video, so he made no money off it. Again, most in-touch company. way. So it seems that what Nintendo do is they sit in the shadows, they wait for you to become successful just so they can snipe you. I mean, does this affect me? No, not really. I'll be honest. I played Palworld once on stream, and then I realized like how boring the game was. I really just couldn't get engaged in it. I just don't think it was a game for me. Oh no, a game came out and it's not PS1 graphics or all in the head. Oh, unplayable. I mean, if you look at my Steam library, it is just absolutely cooked. What have I got? I mean, Dead Rising Remaster came out. That was actually really good, to be fair. Overwatch 2, that's one of the games of all time. Outer Wilds, also a good game. Tribal Hunter as well, even better game. 10 out of 10 game of the year. So yeah, my Steam library is very cooked. I think if anything, Palworld was kind of doomed from the start because, again, they're going against Nintendo. They've always had insane rules, restrictions, regulations, to the point that basically if you're buying one of their products, you are not allowed any rights anymore. There's a great video on YouTube by Moon Channel, basically going into detail why Nintendo is so overprotective of its intellectual properties, much more than other companies.
Universal would sue Nintendo in the infamous Universal City Studios Incorporated versus Nintendo Company Limited, in which Universal Studios alleged that Nintendo's video game Donkey Kong was infringing on their intellectual property rights in King Kong. Judge Robert W. Sweet ruled that Universal had no right over the name King Kong or the characters and story. But consider what this lawsuit meant to Universal. It caused them to decisively lose their attempt to own King Kong. This early lawsuit evidently traumatized much of Nintendo's leadership to follow. Everyone at Nintendo got a first-hand look at how even a titan like Universal could lose a property as valuable as King Kong out of mere carelessness. Having seen what had happened to Universal then, Nintendo would make sure that such a mistake would never happen to them.
I mean, I talked about Donkey, but another example of a YouTuber that Nintendo went after was Ludwig. He basically used a slightly modified version of Super Smash Bros. For a tournament that he was running. And since then, Nintendo has basically addressed more guidelines of how these Smash tournaments should be, including placing a cap of 200 participants, prizes can't be over $5,000, no sponsors, and it forbids the use of modified versions of Smash. Again, it really does scream, you can use this, but you can't be too successful with it. You can have a cash prize, but not too much. It's almost like they want to just keep everything on a leash, like have control over it to an extent. I mean, you've got other companies like, for example, Riot Games, and they're, becoming a part of tournaments for their own games like Valorant, but also to sympathize with Nintendo, to sympathize with the huge out-of-touch billionaire company. You obviously don't want your company to fail if it's got competition, similar to how a company, Tupperware, actually had to file for bankruptcy recently. Tupperware was a company that had to file for bankruptcy because, again, they had so much competition. I always remember, kind of parents and stuff saying, oh, bring out the Tupperware. Like, I thought that was the actual name, but it's the name of the company that makes, plates and, plastic bowls and all that stuff. But again, that's not really, like other companies do that as well. It isn't just Tupperware. But then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the other extreme, where Nintendo are basically filing very vague general patents and sitting on them, hoping that they get infringed so they're able to sue companies. So a brave statement is incoming. I feel like I have one every single video, but Nintendo does not care about you. They only care about your wallet. But again, like me saying this isn't going to stop the legion of Nintendo glazers that just seem to defend them at every single corner. Is Palworld a ripoff of Pokemon? Yes. Yes, it is. But also, Nintendo filing these very vague lawsuits like catching creatures with an item. What? So I'm going to leave the video on this. I was playing through Cyberpunk 2077 recently, and I feel that Arasaka is like the royalty-free name for Nintendo, because that will be how big Nintendo will be in the year 2077.